I think it's working. It says recording, so I think that's good. Do you want to start by naming like the required stuff, like your name, major, year, and where you're from?
I'm Donnie Harmon. I'm in my first year at Ball State. I'm majoring in sports production, and I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay. And then how'd you end up in this class?
Well, when I was just filling out my schedule, or someone was filling it out for me, they put me in the 199 class, and they gave me an option of the different sections and just sort of named what they were about. And a lot of them just sounded like really boring stuff I didn't care about. And then mentioned one was on like race and racism, and it seemed like a good class to take that would actually like be productive and I would gain something from, and was also relevant at the time. And just sounded like a good class to take, so I signed up for that one.
Okay. So like, were you, I guess like, what'd you expect, or like, what did you hope for, like coming into this class? Cause you did know like kind of what it was about before coming in.
To be honest, what I hope for is kind of, I feel like what I got out of it, because just productive conversations and just educational stuff and just thinking about things in different ways. I was just hoping to like learn something new and take something out of it, and just have like this critical thought put towards the conversations. And I feel like I got out of that. It was sort of what I expected heading into it, where we just discussed different issues and different ideas.
Okay, so you're from Fort Wayne. I don't know anything about Fort Wayne. I have one neighbor who lives there. So what is like, I know Fort Wayne's like pretty big. So what was Fort Wayne like as a whole like, or like, I guess like what was like your neighborhood in Fort Wayne like as far as like the issue of like racism and anti-racism?
Well, Fort Wayne as a whole is fairly diverse. So it's a large city, so you're going to get that. But I was on the more suburban part of town, so my neighborhood was, well, both neighborhoods I've lived in have been majority white. It's not like, I feel like, I don't know, it's not like everyone just like racist or isn't willing to have conversations or anything, but it is definitely a majority white area. You do get like ideological variance, and it's not just like monolithic, like stereotypical suburban people everywhere. But it is definitely not the most diverse place, and definitely a more conservative area, I would say, overall.
Gotcha. So do you think
I let my dog in. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. So did that have much of an impact on the way that you like viewed race or thought about race like growing up, since you were in an area that was so white?
I mean, it affected in the fact that like most of what you like your views on race, they sort of come from like what you see on like TV and whatever you're exposed to through forms of media, just because you don't witness it as much in like your everyday life, and you don't really have to think about it as much just in the area you're from, I would say, overall. So yeah.
Okay. So was like race really something that you even had much thought about like growing up, like before you got into college, or like maybe even like high school?
Later on in high school, I started thinking about a lot more and becoming more like, I don't know, just socially aware and just trying to like educate myself on certain things. But growing up, it wasn't like people were having conversations about it too often, or something people would just sort of like avoid, I would guess, because it was more convenient when you grow up in like a majority white area. People don't really have to have conversations as much, and I don't think a lot of people want to have those conversations.
Okay. Okay, so people weren't talking about it much, and like I get that because I kind of grew up in the same situation. Did you ever like witness anything, or like have to like witness anything that had anything to do with like race or like racial conflict that wasn't like through media, that was like in person, like in your school or in your town or anything?
As far as like, let me think a second. I don't remember like witnessing firsthand like any real racist incidents. Obviously, when you're younger, you hear people say racist things. It's just something that happens. And I think at a younger age, people, like especially boys, are more into like edgier humor, and you hear a lot more racist jokes when you're in like middle school. and stuff. But as you get older, people sort of like go away from that. They don't really like, I think people mature, don't really make jokes like that as much. As far as like big racist like incidents, I can't really remember many that happened. I don't remember seeing like any outward racisms towards other people that often.
Okay. So you mentioned that this class was like the section that we're in, like the section about anti-racism in America. You mentioned that it was like really relevant at the time, and it still is. But so was there anything like, what about, I don't know, we registered for classes like in June or July. So what was it about that time that made you think like, oh, this is really relevant, and like this is a class that sounds interesting, like I should take because it seems important at this moment in time? Like, what was it that made you think that?
I feel like that was sort of at like the peak of the Black Lives Matter protests across the country and the peak of like the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor protests. So it was obviously a time where a lot of these conversations were being had in a much more like public and widespread setting. And there's a lot of stuff happening in my city that I felt very strongly about, just like the way protesters were treated and the way police officers handled the protests in my city. So I felt very passionate about it, and it felt like just something that was the right class to take at the right time.
Yeah. Did Fort Wayne have, I mean, I know my town had one, but my town's smaller. Did Fort Wayne have like one or like several protests going on during that time?
Yeah, we had about 3 days straight of protests, and they were like protests where it was peaceful, especially like the first day, but then police showed up and sort of just indiscriminately started tear gassing people and shooting rubber bullets. There was like children getting maced and stuff, and it was really bad. So then there was a little more chaotic after that. The second day was pretty much more of the same, where it was peaceful. Then you had more tear gassing, more rubber bullets, more stuff like that happening again. And yeah, a lot of chaos. And the third day, it was pretty peaceful because the police sort of showed up and actually like did their attempt at unity, I guess you could say, which you saw in some other cities where it ended up actually working, like in Flint, Michigan, where the police officers actually joined protesters and you didn't have any violence or anything like that. So they did that the third day, and it was more peaceful in the first 2 days. It was a little too late after at that point.
Gotcha. Did you go to any, or did you like know anybody who did?
I wasn't there in person. I try to like spread awareness for like social media about some of the stuff going on in my city. I wasn't actually there in person, and I wasn't like talking to many people that were like going to it. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so I know like by the time that we got to school, the protests were sort of dying down a bit because there was some justice that was being accomplished through them. But was like your arrival at Ball State, as far as like the like racial issues that were happening that are still happening, like was it different than what you expected, or was it like does it feel like Ball State is like more or less like socially aware of stuff like that than you thought they would be?
I feel like Ball State, the administration, a lot of the people here, like obvious, I feel like they're socially aware, but they don't want to have difficult conversations at times. They don't really want to name issues, and they sort of shy away from stuff like that. Like we've seen some of the recent incidents on campus with harassment and stuff. I would say through like in like classrooms, people are just like pretty socially aware, and a lot of the professors I've had tend to be socially aware. But at the administrative level, people sort of, I say, shy away from difficult conversations at times.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely like we had the unit that was about like institutional
Mm-hmm.
racism, you know, and like how college campuses and presidents responded to stuff. Do you feel like that's how it is here too?
Yeah, or they'll respond, but they really won't talk about the issue as much. They'll just sort of give vague responses and say they stand with the students and whatnot, but just not going to do much until the next incident happens.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in this class, we obviously talk about race a lot because that's what the class is about. And I think, does that extend like to most of like your honors classes too? Like, do you guys talk about stuff like that, or like has it come up at all?
I wouldn't really say I'm in that many honors classes right now, and a lot of them are my classes are more asynchronous or don't really pertain to stuff like that. So I don't really get too much of that conversation like outside of this class, other than when like a professor goes off on a tangent, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then so I'm assuming it's the same like outside of the honors college too, just like people don't talk about it very much in any other classes.
Yeah, I mean, just running down my schedule now, a lot of the other classes will like pertain to that time. I say my TCOM 101 professor will sort of go off on like tangents sometime that aren't necessarily like related to the course material, but you'll start talking about them some. But a couple of my classes are like asynchronous. I'm just not in a ton of classes right now in general. So yeah.
So you think like in the classes that you do have that are like in person or maybe like on Zoom where you're at least like talking with the professor, like do you think they do a decent job at trying to like be inclusive for their student like population of their classes?
It's hard to say because I think like this class, I have like my TCOM 101 class I had in person like 1 day a week. And then I have like one other small section for COM 210 that I didn't really go to that often. So it's sort of difficult to say whether or not like they do a good job of like being inclusive. So I don't think I have like a large sample size to really go off of.
That's fair. Yeah, I had someone ask me the same thing and I was like, I don't really know how to answer that. Okay, so as far as is the connection okay? I'm getting like messages that it's weird. Um, as far as like in this
It says
class,
your bandwidth is low, but
okay, but you can like hear and see fine.
yeah.
Okay, sick. Um, so if this class like is the only class that kind of is like that, since it's kind of designed to be like that, I know you mentioned that you were hoping to have like more conversations like the ones that we had in class, and we kind of in this class kind of fulfilled a lot of the stuff that you were hoping for. Is there anything like specific about this class that you were like happy that we talked about, or that like you really learned and are gonna like keep with you for however long? Does that make sense? I don't even know if that question made sense.
Yeah. I definitely think it's sort of the class like discusses a wide range of ideas and just sort of like theories and thoughts. And I think it gets you to like analyze maybe race in a different way than you have before, where you view it more in some ways as like a construct in certain ways and just like how it's shaped. And you sort of view it in a way that's more complex than just one person from one race saying they don't like someone from another race. You just suddenly get a more complex view and something that helps you understand it in a deeper way, I think, which I like a lot.
Yeah. Um, I remember at the beginning of the course, we were talking about how we wanted it to be, because I think we were kind of making up the rules that we wanted to follow, like in the course, if I remember correctly. I just remember having a conversation about how we were hoping that it would be possible, like within like the space of our discussion, to be able to like speak our viewpoints without feeling like we were going to be judged because of it. And like, do you think that people were able to like offer different viewpoints, or do you think it was pretty like constant in the conversation that we had?
I mean, like, I feel like people definitely have like a platform to like say what they want and not be judged necessarily, but like no one in the class is gonna be like, I mean, it's a class about anti-racism and like how racism happens. No one's gonna like go on there and just sort of like say something like outwardly racist or something that like differs with the viewpoints that are being expressed. Like people definitely aren't going to be judged and do definitely get like a chance to say something. But I feel like if someone actually like went on there and said something that was just completely out of left field, the response wouldn't be the best. And I don't think anyone in the class really has any of those ideas to offer. So I feel like uh, most people in the class aren't really going to say something that's going to get them heavily judged, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I kind of felt the same way about it. Hopefully, everybody, hopefully, most of the people that took that class took it because they looked at the different sections available and were like, yeah, anti-racism, that's what I want to
Yeah.
learn about. So do you think that your perspective changed like a little or a lot like throughout the semester because of this class specifically, or did it kind of like solidify how you already felt about certain things?
Could you like repeat that? You were sort of breaking up and I couldn't really understand it too well.
Oh, sorry. Do you think, was it okay, this course, did it change your perspective on things, or did it like solidify how you already felt about issues more or less?
I feel like it solidified how I feel more and educated me more on certain issues. Like it just sort of took what I already felt and expanded upon that, and just yeah, I feel like there's definitely some things that are like newer ideas that I hadn't really thought of as much before, but overall, it more so solidified my ideas. Like I let my dog out quickly.
I'm trying to think of where I want to go next, I guess. Okay, was there any like one unit, I guess, like in this course that you remember that was like the most like profound for you, I guess, like that kind of made you think the most, or were they all like more or less as eye-opening?
I think some lessons or individually sort of hit more than others, definitely. Uh, I remember like, there's definitely a few that'd be up there. If I can like look at the list, I guess. Uh, yeah, just give me a second. Yeah, but like I definitely feel. I remember Dr. Bartlett's lesson on a lot of like housing inequality and housing discrimination. I found that to be very like, eye-opening and informative. I think a lot of like the lessons and things we learned regarding more like systemic, actual like policy-based issues were very informative and educational. Some of them like I already was like knew about, but it just sort of expanded upon that. I would say, and I think early on we sort of had lessons learning about more like race as a construct and ideas like that. Those are things I hadn't really like, thought about a ton, and were fairly eye-opening to me.
Yeah, was that like really surprising? Because I know, like, I think when I was reading the stuff about like redlining, especially like in Muncie, and kind of how like the subdivisions were created and like the covenants that they put in place and like just all the rules that they had, I was like, oh my God, that's insane. I can't believe like it was like that. Still, like, was that like really surprising for you too? Or like, was there anything, I guess, that was really surprising?
Like I was fairly like I'd heard of like redlining, knew a little bit about it. I knew there was like some housing discrimination that happened back then. But, like I didn't realize like to the extent of how like how far housing discrimination went, and it just sort of like stood out to me. So I feel like a lot of this stuff is just sort of like the key to understanding a lot of the inequalities that like still go on today. And I feel like people would have a better understanding of like systemic racism and issues like that if people were more educated on things like past housing discrimination, like northern segregation. Because I feel like it's something that doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot. Like I maybe heard mentioned once in high school, it's just something that usually gets skipped over and is like a forgotten part of history.
Yeah. Um, when you were reading that, like, did you think about like Fort Wayne at all? Like, when we were learning about redlining, like in Muncie, did you think about like maybe certain neighborhoods like in Fort Wayne that are like separated by like a river or like a highway or something, and you're like, oh, that definitely happened like in my hometown too.
Maybe not like a geographical border, but there's definitely like the southeast part of town is more heavily black. The south side of town is general, and just like certain parts of towns have like different ethnic groups that are more common. I remember just like something like one of my teachers said last year. I think about like a neighborhood he lived in on like the south side of Fort Wayne, which was like near a majority black area, but like his neighborhood was just like mostly white because it was historically like discriminated against black people and did not allow them into that like neighborhood in that area.
Was there, I mean, I guess that one's the probably the easiest one that I could think of to like translate into like your own hometown, just because it is like about Muncie as a town and like what happened. But is there anything like, was there any other unit, or I guess like any other like even article that we read, or even like the book that we read that made you think about like Fort Wayne and kind of compare to like the experiences that you had, or like what you can see in your own hometown, like when you were younger or now?
Uh, there wasn't like a ton of stuff I would say that was like comparing to like my hometown throughout the unit because I feel like I was just trying to like a lot of stuff I wanted to I like applied it more to like the country as a whole and like larger than just my hometown. But a lot of the stuff talking about Muncie definitely looked at my hometown a lot as well, and a lot of like the more systemic based stuff. We definitely looked at my hometown. Just sort of think about like education inequality and a lot of those issues. A lot of it I like have personal experience and just yeah.
Have you always lived in Fort Wayne?
When I was like really little, I lived in like Ohio, but I moved to Fort Wayne when I was like 3, so pretty much my entire life.
Okay, yeah. Everything that you can remember has been in Fort Wayne. So I guess comparing like Fort Wayne and Muncie, um, are they like I know Muncie's different than where I live kind of, but were you like surprised like the difference between Fort Wayne and Muncie, or is it like does it kind of feel the same?
I mean, they're both Indiana. They're both relatively similar. Fort Wayne's a lot bigger. It's tough for me to really draw like too many comparisons. Haven't really like gone out and experienced that much of Muncie or like been to that many places around the city. So far, a lot of the stuff I've done is like outside of the city. So like I haven't seen that much Muncie and really compare it. But and a lot of like cities in Indiana, I feel like they're just bigger and smaller versions of each other.
Yeah, I can definitely see what you mean by that. Um, well, hmm. I don't know what to ask about Muncie. I haven't spent that much time in Muncie either, but I remember I drove through just like a whole parade on accident one time, and I was just caught in the middle of it. It was weird. Um, so do you think like from reading the stuff about like I guess redlining specifically in Muncie, um, it kind of feels to me like there's a lot of work like left to be done. Is that kind of the same like feeling that you have about like Muncie?
Yeah, I would agree because you just look at like maps of redlining and housing discrimination, you see just how much it translates to like the current landscape and where what neighborhoods certain people live in, and it just it's pretty surprising because this was made like 3, 4 generations ago that a lot of this happened, but it still has a profound effect on our world today and like how our society is shaped, and it really translates to pretty much every city. I think you have stuff like this, and particularly Muncie. So I think it's definitely important to try and like help with some of these issues that still exists because of stuff that happened a long time ago.
And then yeah. I don't really know anything about Muncie either. I haven't spent a ton of time in the town much. Are you familiar with like the mayor of Fort Wayne, like at all?
I mean, I don't really follow him too much. Tom Henry, he's been around a long time. He's been mayor for quite a while. He's sort of a well-respected figure in the city, I think.
Gotcha.
Overall.
Has he like especially during the time when you guys had like your 3 day like string of protests, did he say anything like super publicly about what was going on?
I don't remember him being that much of like a figure at that time or providing a ton of leadership, if I can remember correctly. Like I just don't remember him doing anything in particular. Maybe he did, but he's sort of I don't know. He's like a Democrat, but he's pretty like centrist, I would say overall, and just yeah, that's when you're in a city like Fort Wayne's probably like I don't know, it's not like overwhelmingly Democrat or Republican. You're gonna get more of a mixed. Uh, yeah, he's he's been the mayor for a while for some time because he doesn't really like offend anyone or step on any feet. I would say just sort of like a well liked guy overall. But I don't remember him doing anything that really stood out during that time to really provide much leadership or any strong statements.
Gotcha. So he's kind of like university professors when they want to address stuff to make certain groups of people happy, but not say too much as to not like offend other groups, kind of like that.
Yeah, I don't know too much about him, but like that's sort of the impression I get is that he's just like doesn't isn't going to do anything that's going to go really strongly one way or the other.
That makes sense. So does it feel like Fort Wayne is like kind of stuck then, like in terms of moving forward and being more progressive in terms of like fixing issues that have been caused by like racist policies in the past, like as far as your mayor, like do you think anything's going to happen anytime soon to achieve like more justice for certain groups, or do you think it's kind of just going to be like a stalemate for a bit?
I honestly just expect Fort Wayne to be like how it is for probably quite some time. It's just pretty average city. I would say like certain things that need to be addressed, probably improving the educational systems in my city, because like the quality of education that's like provided, like my part of the city that's more suburban, to someone that grows up in the inner city is pretty stark. And I think there definitely needs to be improvements made so someone who like grows up on a like poorer side of town is able to get as just the same quality of education that I got in high school, and like set people up better for college.
Do you see like do you know how many high schools exist like in Fort Wayne? Like how many public high schools?
Yeah, public high schools are actually in the city. There's like 5 Fort Wayne community schools, and there's my district, which is like Southwest Allen. And then there's the Northwest Allen as well. And Northwest and Southwest are both more suburban, but then you have the 5 community schools.
Okay. Um, do you know like can you see or like are you aware of like any differences or like disparities like between like certain high schools like where they're located within Fort Wayne and like kind of the quality of education that they provide?
Yeah, it almost correlates directly. Like even when you look at like community schools, like some are in parts of town that are wealthier than others, and those ones are generally considered as better schools because they're going to get more funding, because a lot of the funding obviously comes from like property taxes. So it almost directly correlates with like the income level and all that to like the quality of education, like how the schools are generally perceived as a whole.
Do you see that with other things too, like maybe like health facilities, like hospitals, if there's more than one in Fort Wayne, or like just other like healthcare facilities, or like stuff in like the public health sector, I guess?
We have a lot of hospitals, and like the one that was downtown, more inner city, I know it was pretty run down, but they're rebuilding it and like building a new one. But we have like, I don't know, probably like 5 big hospitals in the city. So like there's a lot.
Are they all like more or less the same? I don't even know if that would be anything that you would know about, because I know high school and like what you know about high schools is different than what you know about hospitals. But is there like a difference that's apparent to you, like in terms of like where they are within Fort Wayne and how good they are?
Well, I think the one that was more central in the city wasn't as good as like the one that's near me. My mom worked at for a little bit of time. It's a really nice hospital, really big. And there's also like fewer hospitals that serve areas that have larger amounts of people. Like the north side of the city is also like more suburban. There's like 2 hospitals. One I was like, they're both like on the other side of the interstate from each other. Like there's 2 right there. Uh, and it doesn't make as much sense. It's not as centrally located, but there's definitely less serving the more densely populated parts of the city.
Is there anything like I guess I can't think of anything specifically, I guess like parks and stuff. With the way that Fort Wayne is like laid out, I know it's huge. Um, can you like I don't know, I don't know, I guess it's just because like I'm majoring in like architecture, so like I'm into this stuff and like I find it interesting. Um, but is there like a significant difference in the way that the city is laid out because of the population that like inhabits certain areas? Like, is that apparent to you? Like, can you see it?
It's sort of tough to judge because I don't like usually go to parts of the city I don't live on like a ton.
Mm.
There's definitely like, I wouldn't say there's decent enough amenities in parts of the city. Like there's a lot of like parks and all throughout a lot of the city. I would say it doesn't really change depending on like the income level. Uh, but the way the city's laid out, it's obviously more densely populated in certain areas than others. But it's really not like a ton I would know about that, I would say.
That's fair. That's fair. Just wondering. Do you think, I know like Fort Wayne's diverse in terms of like political orientations and race and income and everything. Do you think like most people, or I guess like in your area, like in your neighborhood, do you think a lot of the people that live there are like aware of these issues and like aware of the way that things are operating like in Fort Wayne and like nationwide, really?
It's tough to say. I've lived in like two different neighborhoods in the same part of the city. Like I moved a couple years ago. My older neighborhood, I'd maybe say less as much. It was more just like it was an older neighborhood, but like just more middle class. The newer one I moved to is also pretty middle class, but it's like newer, like a newer subdivision that's been like built up in the last few years. So I'd say my newer neighborhood is like more diverse, and probably like more democratic leaning, I would say overall. I think there's a lot of like GM workers, like union workers in my neighborhood. So like I'm honestly not too sure. I think when you look at like our generation, we're definitely more aware than like our parents' generation is, like more conscious towards social issues. So it's sort of tough to get a read on where everyone stands.
Yeah, that's fair. I know, like, obviously, we're in a different situation because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And so, like, the way that we're interacting with people is different at the moment. Have you noticed anything since, like, going back home? If you've been home, like, at any point during the semester, or, like, if this is your first time being at home since the semester started, like, anything related to this class, like, have you kind of taken with you back home and, like, thought about while, like, back home in Fort Wayne, or, like, just seeing stuff like in Fort Wayne? Like, is there stuff that you've taken with this class and like applied at home and been like, oh, wow, this makes sense. I've experienced this.
Honestly, off the top of my head, there's not like one thing I can think of. Some of the stuff that we learned in the class, I would already sort of like think about and like apply to things I've seen. But like, I feel like what I returned to is pretty much the same thing as what I left, because I haven't like gone back for a weekend or anything. So it's pretty much like the same environment I pretty much remember before I left for college.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess it wouldn't have to make a huge difference, like going home and seeing it if you have already lived there like forever. Like you can kind of think about it while we're in the class. Um, did you think about like, I don't even know if I already asked this. Did you think about like just your hometown a lot, like during certain lessons? I think I already asked you that in a different form. I don't know. Was there um like some stuff probably like kind of forced you to think about how you were growing up in like your hometown and stuff, but was there anything that you like tried to relate, or like was that just not something that you did? That's not something that I did really, so it's all right if not.
I mean, like definitely like the redlining, housing discrimination stuff. I already mentioned a bit, but I related a lot just because it's very similar to what happened in Muncie as to what happened in Fort Wayne, a lot of other cities across the Midwest, I would say, like northern segregation. You can sort of see how it's still like affecting the city today, which is something I was sort of thinking about a lot.
Do you think, I guess not in terms of Fort Wayne, like especially we can kind of move past that, I guess. Um, since 2020 has like been so jam packed with just like stuff the entire time, has anything like shaped your view of like racism or like anti-racism, like the pandemic, like the election, other things? Like, has your view changed as a result of any one like specific thing or group of things?
A second. I would say something that's like relatively notable is just like the current like way we witnessed over the summer of like Black Lives Matter protests. It's sort of like because like it's something that happens like every year you see it happen, but there's some waves that are like bigger than others where you see it more widespread. And like I would say the one that happened this summer was the first time where I viewed it through a lens where I was more like socially aware of things that were going on. I cared more about issues like that. So it was definitely like different to see what was going on through like a different perspective than I had before on something like that. And then, yeah, what was the rest of the question you asked?
Oh God, I don't even know. was there anything, I guess I kind of want to ask now, like, if there was one event, like anytime, like in your lifetime, whether it be this year, or like this class, or like whenever, that you had like an awakening in terms of like anti-racism or racism, that you were like, oh, this is wrong. Things are messed up, more messed up than I thought. Like, was there any event?
There's definitely like some things I can point to, because like obviously everyone grows up learning about like segregation, slavery, and how that was awful and all that. But you don't learn as much about like certain issues that occurred after the Civil Rights Act was passed, and how certain things have continued on even to like the present day. And something that like was, I think, my junior year of high school, something that was very eye-opening. I watched like, it's pretty well-known documentary, like 13th, which like talked about mass incarceration a lot, and like the war on drugs and the negative effect that had on like Black communities in the United States. And that was something I really didn't know too much about before. And that was something that sort of opened my eyes to a lot of the systems that were put in place even after like you had the Civil Rights Act passed. It started, I viewed like racism and how it like affects our current society. I started like educate myself more after that, and like just do my best to learn more. And it sort of just affected the way I viewed things, I would say.
Did you watch that like in class? Or did you just watch it on your own?
No, I was just sort of like scrolling through I was just like scrolling through Netflix one night, like popped up as like something recommended, and like saw the trailer. I was like, oh, that looks interesting. I'll watch it. And yeah.
Cool. I don't think I've heard of that or watched it, so maybe I'll check that out. I think I've pretty much been going through this like guide, kind of making up my own stuff. But we've been here for like 40 minutes, so I guess I kind of want to ask, like, I don't know, is there anything like that you want to add about just like what this class has offered you, or like if this class is like connected anything, like any ideas that you've had before, or if it's like challenged your way of thinking, or like offered new perspectives, whatnot?
I feel like this class has been important just because like there's obviously like a lot of ideas that people like learn and like know about regarding like anti-racism, but it's something that this class sort of just makes sense of it all and puts it all together. I feel like, and almost like offers a guide and like how to learn more about it and just become like stronger in your beliefs. So I feel like this class is definitely just an important class to take and learn. I feel like it's a class that should be more widespread, I think, in university, and something that should be taught to more people.
Yeah. Have you felt like at any point, like during the semester in this class, were you ever like, why is this just an honors class? Like, why isn't everybody having to take this? I felt like that before.
Yeah, because like I mentioned it before, like things like housing segregation that just aren't commonly taught, that people like should know more about, and it really drastically affects someone's understanding of like our current society and landscape. And I feel like this is a class that just can, if someone isn't like educated on things like this, it can affect their point of view and just really change things. So I feel like this class should definitely be taught more, just not like one section with like, I don't know, maybe two classes in the honors college.
Yeah. For the people that aren't taking this class, like just any like friends that you have that aren't in the honors college, or just like are in a different section, talking about something else, or like family members that you have, or like friends that don't go to Ball State, like, do you think, like, have you, or like will you take what you've learned in this class and like apply it to any like conversations that you have, or just like bring it up? I don't know, like, will you like kind of put it on yourself to educate others about the things that you've learned in this class, because like not everybody is learning this stuff?
I feel like there's definitely going to be time for something I've learned from this class will pop up in a conversation where I might have like a counter to someone who like says something ignorant, and it's just something. Yeah, I feel like this class is definitely going to like, certain things will affect conversations going forward that are ahead.
Yeah, I know I had that thought a lot during the semester, like I can use this at some point. Have you had to deal with that yet at all? Like, have you had to bring something up that you've learned in this class?
Not really, no.
Have you had like I don't know. Is race like something that you talk about like with anybody? Like I know like in the honors college, I think it comes up a lot for me. Um, is it a conversation that you have like often or like at all outside of this class?
Outside of this class, occasionally I'll have like a conversation with someone, not usually with my family, but maybe with a friend about certain issues. We'll sit down and have like conversations. But typically, like when I'm with friends, I don't want to like talk politics or political or social issues as much. I'd rather just like goof around, you know?
That's fair. Um, yeah, I guess I'm wondering, this is probably gonna be my last question. If there are any other like specific ways or just like ways in general that you think this class like is gonna like help you in the future, whether it be like just with talking about things and just like educating yourself and being more aware of things. Like, is there anything else that you think you're gonna get out of this?
Ultimately, like I have this class is sort of what you mentioned, just being more educated and being more prepared to like assess things and critically view racial issues. And just this class taught me, I feel like, a lot and just broadened my perspective some and just taught me more, which is ultimately uh, what you want from a class is to learn something that you can take forward with you. It's not just an academic course that you go in at the end of the semester, you're done with.
Yeah. And yeah, yeah. I don't think I have anything else to add for that. So I think I'm done. Um, yeah, thanks for the interview.
Mhm.
I can figure out how to stop doing this.